everyone, welcome to TVP World. My name is Diana Skaya and we're here at the Warsaw Security Forum. And my guest here is Mikhail Khodorkovsky, one of Vladimir Putin's most outspoken critics, a leading figure in the Russian opposition and co-founder of Russian Anti-War Committee. Mikhail,
I'm very glad that you're with us today at the Security Forum office. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Let me ask you this. You've been in emigration for over 10 years. Am I right in thinking that you still manage to influence things inside Russia?
Судя по тому, что мои выступления смотрят сотни тысяч.
Well, judging by the fact that my speeches are watched by hundreds of thousands, sometimes even 1 million people, most of whom live in Russia, it seems that what I say is still of interest to that part of Russian society.
For example?
I
often speak on topics related to the Russian economy, war and peace, especially today's war, Russia's relations with other countries and political events happening inside Russia. I'd say that most of these topics, not all but most, are of interest to my fellow citizens. Again, yes, probably more people from the older generation, those aged 50 and above, know me and listen to me. But these people still make up the majority of Putin's electorate in Russia.
And do they believe you? For example, if we take the war in Ukraine, what do they believe?
Unfortunately, after more than 3.5 years of war, the situation in Russian society has changed dramatically. Yesterday I spoke at a plenary session here, and I was told that at the beginning of the war, 2/3 of the population supported it, and now polls show that 2/3 still support it. I say yes and no, because at the beginning of the war, those numbers were false. That support didn't really exist, but now it's more likely true because people have lost the sense of cause and effect. They've forgotten how the war started. In their minds, the war has always been there, and since it's been there, people say they want it to end through. The war has already been there, so people respond by saying, we would like it to end through negotiations, but we would also like to win. And the memory that it was Putin who started this war, started it out of nowhere, began killing people, began killing our neighbors and even direct relatives, has faded. Because in Russia, as you know, many families have relatives in Ukraine. This understanding has gradually disappeared from people's minds under the influence of propaganda. And this is the problem with long wars. People begin to feel like they're living in a different paradigm. For them, war becomes something normal. Although what kind of normal is that, for heaven's sake?
Mikhail, what does the picture of Russia after Putin look like? Is that even a possibility? And what do you think? How can any changes be brought about in Russia?
Well, first of all, of course, there will be a Russia after Putin. Only Putin thinks that there won't be a Russia after him. If back in 2022 the West had made the decision that Putin must lose the war and had provided Ukraine with the necessary support, then Ukraine most likely could have, as part of the Kharkiv operation, pushed Putin's troops out of its territory.
Выбить путинские войска со своей территории.
Do you think the West didn't help Ukraine enough?
Back then, the West didn't help Ukraine enough because it believed that if Putin started losing, he would use nuclear weapons. The West believed that if Putin started losing, he would lose power. That was wrong. The second part was true. And the West believed that if Putin lost power, Russia would collapse. And the collapse of a country with nuclear weapons is what the West feared, although in reality, Russia wouldn't have collapsed if Putin's regime fell. Nevertheless, the West made the decision, and as a result, Putin is not losing the war now. And since he's not losing the war, his power has correspondingly increased. It's possible we'll see Putin in office for another 5 to 7 years.
And after him?
After him, Russia has a fairly well-established tradition. When an autocrat leaves, someone from his inner circle is usually chosen to replace him. I mean, the inner circle makes the choice. And that person will be the one considered the weakest by the inner circle. So the weakest person will come after Putin. What will happen to Russia after Putin will of course depend largely on us, Russians, but to some extent it will also depend on the West. And now the West faces a practical decision. What does it want after Putin? Does it want an Iron Curtain with Russia gradually becoming a province of China? Or a vassal of China, which is where things are currently heading? Or does the West want Russia to be reintegrated into the Western world? No, full integration of Russia probably won't be possible in the near future.
Либо Запад хочет реинтеграции России в западный мир. Да, не полной интеграции России, вероятно, в ближайшем будущем не сможет быть частью, по-настоящему частью современной Европы, но она вполне может быть частью.
Russia likely won't become a true part of modern Europe anytime soon. But it could become a country that is a sister civilization to Europe, something in between Europe and Asia, something that might resemble Russia more than, say, Turkey does.
Чем-то, что может быть в большей степени похоже на Европу, чем Турция, например. Это вопрос. И ответ на этот вопрос сегодня Европа дает себе. Первый ответ.
That's the question, and the answer to that question is being shaped today. Europe is currently giving itself the first answer, the Iron Curtain. In that case, all Russians are guilty. There should be no Russian students, no academic exchange, no cultural exchange. The second answer is more difficult and unpleasant for us Europeans. We distinguish between criminals and hostages. Even if the hostages suffer from Stockholm Syndrome, even if they justify the criminals, even if they look like criminals, we understand they are hostages. And then we continue to interact with them in some way. How? We continue to educate their children here and try not to sever the last threads of connection between Russia and Europe. And that choice is up to Europe.
Не порвать вот эти вот последние ниточки связи между Россией и Европой. И это выбор за Европой.
You just said not to sever the line between Russia and Europe. Let's go back. On September 10th, Poland, with NATO's help, shot down 19 Russian drones over Polish airspace. Do you think that was a mistake or a deliberate Russian provocation? What do you think overall? Poland and NATO responded quickly.
Я абсолютно убежден, что это была осмысленная провокация. Даже я бы сказал бы не провокация.
I'm absolutely convinced that this was a deliberate provocation, or rather, I'd say it wasn't even a provocation in the usual sense. It was a tool of hybrid warfare, psychological warfare. Because Anchorage, Alaska, showed that Europe strongly supports Ukraine, politically supports it, and Ukraine relies heavily on Europe.
Putin, конечно, решил, что надо, чтобы Европа эту поддержку Украине перестала оказывать. А как это сделать?
And of course, Putin decided that Europe should stop giving that support to Ukraine. How can that be achieved? By exerting psychological pressure on the European population so that European society puts pressure on its politicians, or maybe even replaces them with ones more favorable to Putin. Politicians who have a better attitude toward Putin than those currently in power. And how can that be done? By installing fear, by showing that you are defenseless, by showing that NATO won't protect you. And I wouldn't say Putin is entirely unconceiving in this regard. Just look at Poland's reaction. Poland shot down only 20% of the drones. 20%. The rest crashed on their own.
20% дронов. 20% остальные упали сами.
So what should NATO have done? Should it have bombed Russia or what? How do you see it?
Украина, воюющая Украина, которая находится под диким давлением.
Ukraine, a country at war under immense pressure for several years, has shown that it can easily shoot down 80 to 90% of the drones that enter its territory. It's clear how to do it. It's clear what technical means are needed.
Средствами это делать. Почему?
So why was Poland, which borders warring countries, unprepared for attacks from Belarusian territory? Why? How can this be explained?
Ну почему? Вот как это можно объяснить?
Answer the question.
Слушайте, мне сложно
Listen,
сказать.
it's hard for me to say.
Поднимать в воздух истребители против дронов.
Sending fighter jets into the air against drones is a ridiculous situation. Using anti-aircraft missiles to hit them, also ridiculous, because the cost for both sides are simply incomparable. Not having any anti-aircraft machine guns on the border, not having early warning systems. Guys, what are you doing? You're provoking Putin to believe that Europe is completely defenseless.
What advice would you give to governments or NATO, for example?
Я бы сказал, что, во-первых, ситуация, которая сложилась сегодня.
What I would say is, first of all, the current situation, where the military industry of all of Europe, of the European Union, is weaker than Russia's military industry in terms of production volume.
По объемам производства военной продукции.
And the situation where Europe's armies are in fact very weak. Let's put it politely, very weak.
Очень слабы. Давайте так скажем вежливо. Очень слабы. Если бы я был невежлив, я бы сказал бы...
If I were being impolite, I'd say they don't exist. And in a situation where America is stepping back, this situation threatens European countries with the loss of their sovereignty in relation to Putin's Russia.
Европейскими странами своего суверенитета по отношению к путинской России.
Вы знаете, с нами разговаривали вчера вот с коллегами, да, был...
You know, we spoke yesterday with colleagues, I can't recall exactly who, but we spoke with someone, a minister from the Nordic countries, I think. And according to him, NATO reacted very quickly and correctly. That was the right response. And it was precise and correct?
Слушайте, давайте, вот мы с вами обычные люди, да?
Listen, let's be honest. We're just ordinary people, right? There were 20 drones launched. The cost of one drone, well, definitely less than $10,000, right? For that type of drone. So in total, Russia spent a maximum of $200,000 on this.
В ответ было ударено зенитными ракетами общей стоимостью $1 миллион с лишним долларов.
In response, anti-aircraft missiles worth over $1 million were used, 6 times more expensive. And fighter jets were scrambled, each hour of which costs around $60,000. And they can't even shoot down drones because the drone's speed is too low compared to the jets. Why were they scrambled? No one understands. If that's the correct reaction, then please explain to me what an incorrect reaction would be.
Зачем их поднимали в воздух, никто не понимает. Если это правильная реакция, то объясните мне, что есть реакция неправильная.
Thank you very much, Mikhail Khodorkovsky, for being here with us.
And that's all for us here on TVP World at the Warsaw Security Forum. I'm Diana Skaya, and my guest was Mikhail Khodorkovsky, from the co-founder of the Russian Anti-War Committee, in our exclusive interview. Thanks for watching.